Mr. Eze and his wife Amaka lived a life that many people envied. They had it all: wealth, love, and a beautiful family. Eze was a successful businessman with several shops and properties across the city. He had a team of young men working under him, and his business continued to flourish. Eze, despite not having the opportunity to formal education, Eze's kindness, compassion, and determination have made him a pillar of strength to those around him. One of the most remarkable aspects of Eze's character is his unwavering commitment to his wife. 10 years ago, he single-handedly sponsored her through school, making countless sacrifices to ensure she had every opportunity to succeed. Amaka, on the other hand, was a banker. She is intelligent, hardworking, and dedicated to her job. Eze admired her passion for her job and never tried to come in between her and her career. Instead, he supported her every step of the way. As a mother, Amaka was loving and caring. She always put the needs of her children first and made sure they lacked nothing. Eze and Amaka had 4 beautiful kids who were the center of their universe. Eze's life revolved around his family and business. He worked hard to provide for his loved ones, and he made sure they lacked nothing. He treated Amaka like the queen that she was, showering her with love, attention, and gifts. Their friends, relatives, and even people in their town admired the Eze family. They were seen as a model family, and many people looked up to them. As time passed, Eze felt an increased sense of unease. A dark cloud seemed to have settled over his mind, casting a shadow over his thoughts. He knew the devil was trying to tempt him with doubts and fear, but Eze was determined not to let these thoughts consume him. He didn't want to put his family at risk, not even for a moment. Despite the turmoil brewing inside him, Eze remained the loving father and husband he had always been. He continued to provide for his family, supporting and encouraging them. One day, as Eze prepared for a business trip to China, Amaka noticed something was off. She was packing his briefcase and luggage, ensuring he had everything needed for the long journey. As she approached him, she saw the gloomy expression on his face and asked what was wrong. Eze shook his head, forcing a smile. "It is nothing, my love," he said, trying to reassure her. "Just a little stressed about the trip, that's all." Amaka looked at him skeptically but didn't push the issue. After Eze left for China, Amaka and the children settled into their routine. However, Amaka's schedule became tighter due to Eze's absence on business. Eze's business trip had finally come to an end, and he had informed his wife Amaka about his return. Amaka was overjoyed and had decided to prepare a delicious meal to welcome her husband back home. The children were equally excited, having only seen their father through calls for weeks. But Amaka's happiness was short-lived. Less than 24 hours before Eze's expected return, Amaka received a devastating phone call. Her husband was involved in a plane crash and there were no survivors. Amaka's world crumbled around her. She felt like she had been punched in the gut and she couldn't breathe. She thought it was some kind of sick prank call, but as the news was confirmed, her reality shattered. Her in-laws were equally devastated, and the atmosphere was filled with grief and despair. Amaka's mind was racing with questions. What would become of her? How would she cope with raising their children alone? She felt lost and alone, unsure of how she would navigate this new and painful reality. 7 days after Eze's demise, his elder brother visited Amaka with an evacuation paper in hand. He instructed her to pack up her belongings and leave the house with the kids. Amaka was shocked and felt like her world is crumbling again. She had never imagined that this would happen to her. As she read through the papers, she discovered her husband's will had left nothing for her and their children. His properties, including their residential house, has been shared among his siblings and mother. Amaka felt like she was living in a nightmare and she couldn't wake up. She couldn't understand why her husband would do this to her and their children. Amaka and the children were left crying and wailing, their world shattered by the sudden loss of husband and father. The pain was unbearable, and they didn't know how they would move on without him. Early the next morning, Amaka's in-laws and mother-in-law arrived at the house. Amaka was still reeling from the shock of her husband's death and the subsequent eviction notice. She was crying uncontrollably, questioning why they had done this to her. Her mother-in-law approached her, a look of disgust in her face. "You killed my son, Amaka," she spat. "You made him walk in his own shadow. You made him travel so he could clear his head." Amaka was taken aback by the accusation. "What are you talking about?" she asked, shocked. Her mother-in-law handed her a paper. "Eze called us few weeks ago, crying that he is not the father of all these children," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You are a devil, Amaka." Amaka was beyond shocked. She didn't know what to say or do. Few weeks ago, it was Valentine's Day, and Eze had planned to surprise his wife. He had booked a fine dinner place and had dressed up to pick her up from work. When he arrived at her workplace, one of the securities informed him that Amaka had been on a 2 weeks leave. Eze was confused. Amaka had left for work this morning, and he had assumed that she was at the office. He made a few confirmations and his heart sank. He left and went home, pretending like nothing had happened. That evening, Amaka came home and even told him about her day at work. Eze listened, his heart heavy with suspicion. The next day, Amaka left for work as usual, and Eze decided to tell her. He followed her out of town, watching in shock as she picked up a guy and kissed him before getting into a car, one of the cars he had bought for her. Eze's heart was shattered. He couldn't believe what he was saying. He continued following them, watching as they entered one of the hotels on the outskirts of town. Eze's world was crumbling around him. He felt like he had been living a lie, and he didn't know how to process his emotions. He was torn between anger, sadness, and betrayal. Eze couldn't believe what he had discovered. His wife, Amaka, the woman he had loved and trusted for so many years, had been betraying him in the worst possible way. He had never suspected her of infidelity. He had never had a reason to doubt her loyalty. Even when people had tried to warn him before they got married that she might leave him someday as he is not educated, he had refused to listen. His family has always loved and respected Amaka, and he had given her everything she could possibly want. He had taken her on luxurious vacations, showered her with expensive gifts, and provided for her every need. How could she repay him by betraying him so utterly? Amaka had continued living her life in pretense, and Eze kept quiet too, watching her every step. He couldn't think straight. He couldn't process the emotions that were swirling inside him. He knew he had to take action, but he didn't know where to start from. He decided to carry out a DNA test on the children, hoping against hope that they were his. But the results were devastating. None of the children were his own. Eze felt like he had been crushed. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. He had to call his family and lawyer, and he told them the truth. He didn't know how he was going to get through this, but he knew he had to leave her presence, and he traveled, which unfortunately led to his end. As they confronted Amaka with the truth, she fell on her knees, begging for forgiveness. But Eze's mother was unforgiving. She slapped Amaka across the face, her anger and hurt boiling over. The children began crying, sensing the tension and anger in the air. Eze's mother ordered the security guards to escort Amaka and the children out of the house. Amaka's phones were confiscated and she was left with nothing. As she was led out of the house, Amaka was barefooted, her dignity and pride shattered. She had lost everything, her husband, her home. She was left with nothing but shame. This story left the viewers and the writer questioning, what do women really want? Please like, subscribe and hit on the notification button so as to get notified when I post new videos. Thank you. Please like